Hi, fourth graders. So I kind of had put a hold on our signposts for a little while, but well, since we've been remote, but I would like to jump back into them so that way we can have all the signposts actually by Christmas break, and then we can do some more deep diving into them when we come back from Christmas break. So we've talked about tough questions, we've done contrasts and contradictions, and we've also talked about, oh no, my brain's gonna, aha moments. My brain was gonna freeze there for a second. And we've talked about aha moments. So those were the three that we've done so far. So we're going to talk about our new signpost, which is Words of the Wiser. And so we're going to be learning about how this signpost will help us understand the plot and how characters are developing and how conflicts arise and even like the theme. So let's think about what we think Words of the Wiser might mean. When I think of Words of the Wiser, I think of my mom. My mom is always somebody who gives me lots of advice. And that's just what Words of the Wiser is. It's when you have a character in the book who's usually older and much wiser, who helps the character to see things from a different perspective, usually gives them advice or helps or gives them a different way to look at a situation. So that way that advice or that way of looking at a situation in a different way will help them grow and learn. And usually this helps with the theme of the story. So when authors like a mom or a dad or maybe like a grandma or a grandfather or just somebody older in your life, somebody who's older and wiser in your life, will share these little nuggets of wisdom, right? These little nuggets of help or information, and this help will create a way for your eyes to open and your mind to see something in a different way. So here's our chart for Words of the Wiser. So when you're reading and a character, probably much older and wiser, takes the main character aside and gives serious advice, you should stop and ask yourself, and here's our question that we should ask ourselves: what's the life lesson and how might it affect the character? These words, this older and wiser person who gives this serious advice is usually linked to a life lesson. And the life lesson is always usually linked to, or always usually, that's not possible, is always linked to the theme. So whatever the lesson is will hint towards a theme of the story. So what is the life lesson and how might it affect the character? This is usually going to be a catalyst for some kind of change. This a lot of times will go together with an aha moment that a character will have. A character oftentimes after this serious advice, after they have this talk, leads to the character going, oh my goodness, and having this big aha moment. So what is the life lesson and how might it affect the character? So I would like you to get out your I sent you home part of a story, Writing Freedom. And with the story Writing Freedom, there was a paper along with it that looked like this that we're going to be doing together while I read excerpts from Writing Freedom. So I do want you to follow along with the excerpts from Writing Freedom. And then I also want you to have this paper out with your pencil. And we're going to see if we can figure out what these older, wiser characters are trying to do for the main character. So in this scene that I'm going to be reading from this book, there's a young girl, and her name is Charlotte. And this is set back in the mid-1800s. And I think some of you have read this book before, so it'll be familiar to you, so that'll be good. So this girl, Charlotte, her parents have died. And she lives in an orphanage. So an orphanage is a place where kids who do not have families, do not have people who can take care of them, all live together in this one space. And Charlotte loves horses, but the person who runs the orphanage where she lives forbids her to work with them. And the only reason why she's telling her she can't work with them is because she's a girl. So because Charlotte's a girl, the owner of the person who oversees, who takes care of the orphanage, won't let her work with the horses. And for Charlotte, life on the orphanage is really hard. And at some point she realizes that she just can't stay there any longer. She can't be there. Being in the orphanage is too difficult for her, and it just is not a good space for her to be. So she has decided to run away from the orphanage. So we're going to look at just that very first part before the line. It's a very short scene, and it's where Charlotte is going to tell a trusted older and wiser adult at the orphanage. This is somebody that she has learned to trust. His name is Vern. She's going to tell him that she's planning to leave, that she has to escape. She can't live in this orphanage any longer. And Vern's job at the orphanage is to take care of the horses. Okay? And one of the horses' names is Justice. So just so you know, so you won't be too confused when we read this first little section. So I just want you to follow along with me while I read aloud this first section. Thanks, Vern. I wish I could stay with you and work with the horses, but I'd be in the kitchen, and I'd be missing Justice and fretting 'cause I wouldn't get to see Charity's foal or help you name it. I know, Miss Charlotte, said Vern. You gotta do what your heart tells you. I won't ever forget you, said Charlotte. I guess I'm not likely to forget you, Miss Charlotte. So I'm gonna stop here because this, even just in this one tiny little scene, I've noticed some piece of advice that Vern has offered to Charlotte. Vern, the older trusted adult, has offered to Charlotte. So what was the advice that was offered to Charlotte? We're gonna write that right in this first section on our paper. What was the advice Vern offered to Charlotte? When I look back and I look back at what I just read, it sounds like his advice was you got to do what your heart tells you. You got to follow your heart. You got to trust your gut, right? You got to trust your instincts. If you feel like this is what you have to do, well, you got to do it. So the piece of advice that Charlotte offered was you got to do what your heart tells you. So go ahead and write that in this section. You got to do what your heart tells you. And it's right there on your paper. You got to do what your heart tells you. Right? Right here. I know, Miss Charlotte, said Vern, but you got to do what your heart tells you. Okay? So go ahead and write that. So, and now let's think how this advice could affect Charlotte. Or what does this advice mean, or how might it help Charlotte? What do we think? I'm thinking that maybe this advice will help Charlotte. It's going to help her now, and it might help her in the future, because she's leaving. So so Vern's giving her this advice that in everything that she does, in every choice that she makes, in every decision she makes, she should trust her heart. She should go with what she feels the strongest about. So that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that this piece of advice is going to be something that's going to help her all along in the future, to trust her heart. So I would write that this advice could help Charlotte always in the future. Right? It's going to help her with her courage. It's going to help her later and on and on and on and again. So I'm going to give you a second, about a minute to write that in. That it's going to affect Charlotte by helping guide her in the future. She's always going to remember this conversation and think, okay, what is my gut telling me? What is my heart telling me I should do? All right. So now we're going to keep reading and see if this piece of advice is true or not for Charlotte. And so now we're transitioning to a next a next small scene in our story. And Charlotte leaves the orphanage and her good friends Vern and Hayward. So she's gone away from all that she has known so far in her life. And she eventually finds a nice older man who lets her live in his barn, and he begins to teach her how to drive a 6-horse stagecoach. And learning to drive the coach is very, very hard work for Charlotte. Okay? So we're going to be paying attention to when the older, wiser person, which is probably going to be this nice old man, right, who is letting her live in his barn. And we're going to be looking for the serious advice he gives her. And the question we're going to ask ourselves is, what's the life lesson and how might it affect the character? So I'm going to have you follow along with the second section with me. Here were 6 strong horses waiting for her commands, her tugs on the reins to tell them which way to go. She yelled, "Ha!" and "Gee!" to get them to bear left and right, like she did when she was riding one horse, or driving 2. She wished Hayward could see her, and Vern. Vern would have never let her get out of that wagon until she figured out the turns. Just like when he taught her to ride. He kept putting her back on Freedom, her horse, after each fall, saying, "Every time you fall, you learn something new about your horse. You'll learn what not to do next time." So here's another important place to stop. I'm going to stop right here, and I want you to see if you can figure out what is the advice that's been offered to Charlotte. So when you figure out what the advice is, I want you to put it on this next line. What is the advice that has been offered to Charlotte? So the advice I was able to see was that she's remembering a time that Vern gave her some advice. And Vern has told Charlotte that every time you fall, that you learn something new that you could use. Something about what not to do the next time. Kind of like learning from your mistakes, right? Learning from you made a mistake or you failed at something. So we're going to learn, okay, I won't do that again, and I'm going to do something different next time. So that's the thing that I was thinking of that she was learning. Now that she's got this piece of information, the advice, right, is to learn. Every time you fall, you learn something new, right? Every time something troubles you or you have a stumbling block in your life, you're going to learn about it. So what is the life lesson and how might it affect the character? So how could this affect Charlotte? How do we think this will affect Charlotte? Go ahead and write that down on your paper. So the life lesson I'm thinking she's learning, or that he's trying to teach her, is that in anything, not just riding a horse, but in anything she does, if she fails at something, she should get back up and try again. She should keep trying. Don't let it stop her. Don't let it affect her in a way that she won't continue to try to learn or to grow or do that activity. To take what she learned from that failure and try again, but try in a different way. So take those mistakes, learn from them. Take the failures, learn from them. That's what I think the life lesson was in the lesson that the advice that was given to her from Vern. So I think it's to, take those failures, take those mistakes, and learn from them. Okay, so we're going to read the last moment, the very last section. And we're going to be thinking about who is giving her advice and what is this advice? What is the advice that's being offered to Charlotte? So we're going to, as the story is unfolding and continues, Charlotte is now a very good stagecoach driver. But on this day, someone from her past wants to ride on her stagecoach, and it upsets her. It makes her upset when she sees this person from her past. Ebenezer, the man who taught her to drive a 6-horse stagecoach, sees that she's upset. Okay? So this guy, Ebenezer, he's the one that taught her how to drive the stagecoach, sees that she's upset. "What are you blabbering about? The mail's got to go through, same as them passengers." Ebenezer puts his hand on Charlotte's shoulder. "Now listen. Don't you pay them passengers no mind. You are what you are. And what you are is a fine horseman. And the best coachman I ever saw. You remember that. Under the circumstances, there ain't nothing left for you to do but your job. So get to it. Charlotte looked square at Ebenezer. Ebenezer looked square back at Charlotte and said, "You're the coachman. You're in charge. So load him up." So here at the end of this scene, we've seen another words of the wiser signpost, and I want to see if you can find this one as well. So what does Ebenezer tell Charlotte that she might remember and hold on to as good advice for the rest of her life, like she has with the advice she's gotten from Vern? What from this section, and you're going to write it in the last section on this page, okay, this last section up here in this top part. What was the advice that was given to her by Ebenezer that she might remember and hold on to as good advice for the rest of her life? And once you write down the advice, I want you to answer the question, what's the life lesson and how might it affect the character? What's the life lesson and how might it affect Charlotte? And that's what you're going to write across from it, right? And you're going to write in the next section over here. Okay? What is the life lesson and how is it going to affect Charlotte? So the advice that I saw, there were a couple things that you could have chose, right? There are a couple pieces of advice that Ebenezer gave. So there isn't one that's the right answer or something that's the wrong answer. There were a few different pieces of advice. One thing I kind of latched onto was, you are what you are. This is who you are. You're it. So don't let the feelings that you have that you saw this other person, don't have that change you. You are you. And that's okay. And that's great. And that's awesome. And that's how you should always be. You shouldn't change because of someone else. So that was the one part I picked up on. Another piece that you could have picked up on was maybe you ain't got nothing left to do but your job. You just got to do your job. Don't let other people affect your task. The thing that you have to do, your task at hand. So life lesson is to just keep on keeping on, right? To keep doing what you know you need to do and not let other people affect you and the job that you need to get done. And a third piece of advice I thought he gave was that she was in charge. This is your stagecoach. You are in charge of the horses. You are in charge of the people on the stagecoach. You take charge. You are allowed to take charge in this situation. This is your job. So do it. Do it to the best of your ability, right? So the life lesson is to be strong in herself and know that it's okay for her to take charge in this situation. This is her stagecoach, her job to do. So I'm thinking how it's going to affect her is that she's going to now have some confidence. She's going to stand up a little taller, right? She's going to be like, okay, I'm in charge. She's going to give her that confidence, that backbone that she needs to do her job. So now I'm thinking all of these things, all of these pieces of advice that have been given to Charlotte, all three pieces of advice that we found, what is the life lesson and how might it affect Charlotte? What overall, from all these three different pieces of advice, the two from Vern and the one from Ebenezer, what is the life lesson and how are these going to affect Charlotte? What do we think the overall life lesson is that Charlotte should be learning? The one thing I'm thinking of, the overall lesson that she is probably learning is that she should be strong in her own choices, right? So like following her heart, if she fails, to keep at it and to try again and learn from her mistakes. And then the last one, when Ebenezer talked about you are who you are, ain't nothing left to do but your job, and you're in charge. All of these things make me think that Charlotte's, the life lesson, the theme of this story is that Charlotte needs to trust in herself. Charlotte needs to find the trust within herself because she can do it. And then I think it's going to affect Charlotte, right? I think so. The theme is that she should be trusting in herself, and I think it's going to affect her to make her a stronger, braver person. I think it's going to help her to see that she can handle these situations. So she's going to be stronger and braver because of it. So you do not need to turn this paper into me at all at school. Sorry, my brain just went blank for a second. Onto Google Classroom. I just wanted to have you have a place to write your thoughts and what's happening right now, because we will be doing another story later this week, and that we will be talking about Words of the Wiser in. And I just wanted you to have that practice of writing these down and thinking about the theme and thinking about the advice that's been given to these characters. So again, when you are reading a book, any book, there may be a character that's probably much older and wiser, and they're going to take the main character aside and give them some serious advice. And when you see this happening, this character taking them aside and giving them some advice, you should stop and ask yourself, what's the life lesson, and how might it affect the character? Okay? Because that's another signpost. That's another big thing that we should be looking for when we are reading our books. All right. I hope you all have a great day. I hope you're paying attention to all of our signposts. Now we have 4 signposts that we have learned when we are reading, and I will see you soon. All right. Bye.